Welcome back to the EMT-Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison, and we're going to be diving into something pretty interesting today.
Yeah,
It's the link between dehydration and blood pressure.
that's right.
A lot of people think it's just about drinking enough water, but there's actually a lot more to it than that.
Absolutely. I'm Olivia Harper, and I'm here to help break down the science behind all of this.
Awesome.
It's especially important for EMTs like you
Right.
because you see the effects of dehydration all the time.
You're right.
Sometimes it's not as obvious as you might think.
Yeah, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is going on in our bodies when we get dehydrated?
Okay, so imagine you're responding to like a multi-car collision on a super hot day.
Oh, yeah?
You're running around, adrenaline's pumping, you're sweating like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You might not even realize how much fluid you're losing.
Yeah.
But basically, it's like a slow motion drought happening inside your body.
Wow.
Our bodies are mostly water,
Right.
and every single cell needs it to work properly.
I see.
So when we lose more fluids than we take in, that's when we get dehydrated and things start to go wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we always hear about electrolytes, too.
Yes.
Where do those fit into all of this?
Electrolytes are like these tiny electrical messengers in our bodies.
Okay.
Sodium, potassium, magnesium.
Right.
They're all super important for things like
Yeah.
nerve signals, muscle function,
All
and
right.
maintaining that balance we talked about.
Okay.
When we get dehydrated, though,
Yeah.
the concentration of those electrolytes gets all messed up,
Oh, wow.
which can lead to a whole bunch of problems.
So it's not just about being thirsty.
Nope.
It's about keeping everything in balance.
Exactly.
So how does all of this affect blood pressure?
Okay. So there are two main ways dehydration can impact blood pressure.
Okay.
Let's start with high blood pressure.
Got it.
When you're dehydrated, your blood volume goes down, but the amount of sodium in your blood stays pretty much the same.
Okay.
This means the sodium concentration actually increases. Oh, I see.
And that triggers the release of a hormone called vasopressin.
Wait, vasopressin. Isn't that the thing that makes you pee less?
You got it.
Okay.
Vasopressin's main job is to conserve water.
Right.
It tells your kidneys to hold on to as much water as possible.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. It also causes your blood vessels to constrict,
Uh-oh.
which then increases your blood pressure.
So it's like your body is trying to make up for the lack of fluids
Right.
by squeezing those blood vessels tighter.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's only one side of the coin.
Really?
Dehydration can also lead to low blood pressure, and that can be super tricky to spot out in the field.
Low blood pressure from dehydration.
Yes.
How does that even happen?
Remember how we talked about blood volume decreasing when you're dehydrated?
Right.
Well, when your blood volume gets really low,
Okay.
there's just less fluid pumping through your system.
I see.
This means less pressure against your artery walls,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to low blood pressure.
We call this hypovolemia.
Hypovolemia.
And it can be a serious issue.
Yeah, especially with patients who are already in a fragile state.
Exactly.
So dehydration can actually push blood pressure up or down.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot more complicated than I thought.
It definitely is.
It's more than just drinking some water.
That's for sure.
So knowing the signs of dehydration is really important.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for EMTs.
Right.
You guys are on the front lines.
Exactly.
It's not always as simple as someone saying, I'm thirsty.
Yeah, especially in an emergency, people might not even realize they're dehydrated.
That's right.
What should we be looking for?
Well, thirst is obviously a big one,
Right.
but it's often a late sign.
Okay.
By the time someone feels really thirsty, they're probably already pretty dehydrated.
Got it.
You also want to watch out for dry mouth and skin,
Okay.
decreased urine output,
Mm-hmm.
and that feeling of being really tired.
Right. Those are the more obvious ones. Yeah. But I remember from my EMT training that there's some other signs, too, that might not be as clear.
Absolutely. Things like headaches, dizziness, and muscle cramps can also mean someone is dehydrated.
Oh, right.
And in severe cases,
Yeah.
you might see a rapid heart rate, low blood pressure, even confusion or delirium.
Wow. So dehydration can really mess with someone's mental state,
You can.
and that might not be easy to spot right away.
Exactly.
What about infants and little kids?
With babies and young children, you have to be even more careful.
Okay.
Look for sunken eyes,
Okay.
a lack of tears when they're crying,
Got it.
and not many wet diapers.
I see. So we've got a good handle on the signs now.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we're at a scene and we think someone might be dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do first?
The most important thing is to make sure the patient is safe and stable.
Of course.
Then you need to figure out what's causing the dehydration in the first place.
Right.
Is it vomiting, diarrhea, excessive sweating, or something else?
Makes sense. We don't want to just treat the dehydration without addressing the root cause.
Exactly. Then depending on how severe the dehydration is,
Yeah.
we can start rehydrating the patient.
Okay.
In mild cases, encouraging them to sip water or an electrolyte drink might be enough.
Right. And I imagine in more serious cases, we need to get an IV going.
Exactly. 5E fluids can get fluids and electrolytes right into the bloodstream,
Right.
which provides really fast rehydration.
So we've talked a lot about how dehydration can negatively affect blood pressure.
Yeah.
But what can we do to stay hydrated, especially in EMS, when things can get pretty hectic?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
I know it can be tough to remember to drink enough water when you're on the go,
it really is.
but making hydration a priority is super important.
I agree.
Keep a water bottle with you and sip on it throughout your shift, even when you don't feel thirsty.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind, right? I'm definitely guilty of that.
Totally. You can also set reminders on your phone
Oh, that's a good idea.
or even use a hydration tracking app.
Cool.
And don't forget about electrolytes,
Right.
especially on those long, hot days. Replenishing those lost electrolytes can make a big difference.
So sports drinks or electrolyte tablets are good options.
They can be helpful, but just be mindful of the sugar content in some sports drinks.
Okay.
You can also get electrolyte powders that you can add to your water.
Right.
That way you have more control over what you're putting in your body.
Good point.
Yeah.
We don't want to trade dehydration for a sugar rush.
Exactly.
So besides just drinking water, are there any foods we can eat to help us stay hydrated?
Definitely think about foods with high water content,
Okay.
like watermelon, cucumbers,
Mm.
even leafy greens.
So a salad for lunch could actually help boost our hydration levels.
Exactly.
Huh. I never thought about it that way.
It's all about making those small choices throughout the day.
That makes sense.
And remember, if you're ever unsure about a patient's hydration status, don't hesitate to talk to a doctor or nurse.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really informative.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today. The science behind dehydration, the science to look for treatment options, and even tips for staying hydrated ourselves.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we'll be back after a short break to wrap up our deep dive into dehydration and blood pressure. Stay tuned.
Sounds good. So let's talk about the science, because it's not always as easy as someone just saying, hey, I'm thirsty.
Right. Especially in those emergency situations, people might not even realize they're dehydrated.
Exactly.
So what kind of red flags should we be looking for?
Well, thirst is definitely a big one,
Yeah.
but it's often kind of a late sign. By the time someone's feeling really parched, they're probably already at least moderately dehydrated.
Got it.
So also look for things like dry mouth,
Okay.
dry skin, decreased urine output,
Right.
and just that general feeling of fatigue.
Right. Those are the more obvious ones. But I remember from my EMT training,
Yeah,
there are some that are kind of less obvious too.
absolutely. Things like headaches, g- dizziness, muscle cramps.
Okay.
Those can all be signs of dehydration. Right.
And in more severe cases,
Yeah.
you might see rapid heart rate,
Okay.
low blood pressure,
Wow.
even confusion or delirium.
So dehydration can really mess with someone's mental state,
Oh, yeah.
which might not be super obvious at first. What about with infants and young children?
With babies and little kids, you have to be even more vigilant.
Right.
Look for things like sunken eyes,
Okay.
a lack of tears when they're crying, and not many wet diapers.
I see. So we've talked about the signs.
Yes.
But let's say we're on a scene and we suspect someone's dehydrated.
Okay.
What do we do first?
The first thing is to make sure the patient is safe and in a stable environment.
Of course.
Then you want to address the underlying cause of the dehydration.
Okay.
So figure out what's causing it.
Right.
Is it vomiting, diarrhea, excessive sweating, or something else?
That makes sense. We don't want to just treat the symptom without figuring out the root of the problem.
Right. And then depending on how severe the dehydration is.
Yeah. We can start rehydrating the patient.
Okay. How do we do that?
In mild cases, encouraging them to sip on some water or an electrolyte solution might be enough.
Okay. And I imagine in more severe cases, we'd need to get an IV going.
Exactly. IV fluids can get fluids and electrolytes directly into the bloodstream,
Right.
which is a much faster way to rehydrate someone.
So we've talked a lot about the negative effects of dehydration on blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some things we can do to stay hydrated ourselves,
Yeah,
especially working in EMS, where things can get pretty crazy?
that's a great question.
Thanks.
I know it's tough to remember to drink enough water when you're constantly on the go,
It really is.
but making hydration a priority is so important.
I agree.
Keep a water bottle with you
Okay.
and sip on it throughout your shift, even when you don't feel thirsty.
Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind, right? I'm
Yeah.
definitely guilty of that.
Absolutely. You can also set reminders on your phone
Oh, that's a good idea.
or even use a hydration tracking app.
Cool.
And don't forget about those electrolytes.
Right, those are important.
Especially on those really long, hot days, replenishing your electrolytes can make a huge difference.
So would you say sports drinks or electrolyte tablets are good options?
They can be helpful, but just be mindful of the sugar content in some sports drinks.
Right.
You can also get electrolyte powders that you can add to your water.
Oh, okay.
That way you have more control over what you're putting into your body.
Good point.
Yeah.
We don't want to trade dehydration for a sugar rush.
Exactly.
So besides just drinking water, are there any foods we can eat that can help us stay hydrated?
Definitely think about foods with high water content.
Okay, like what?
Things like watermelon, cucumbers, even leafy greens.
Interesting. So having a salad at lunch could actually help with hydration.
Exactly.
I never thought about it that way.
It's all about making smart choices throughout the day.
That makes sense.
And remember, if you're ever unsure about a patient's hydration status, it's always best to consult with a medical professional.
Good advice. Well, this has been super helpful.
It has.
We've covered so much today.
Yeah.
From the science behind dehydration to the signs and symptoms and treatment options, and even tips for staying hydrated ourselves.
It's been a great discussion.
It really has. So what do you say we move on to the final part of our deep dive?
Sounds good to me.
Welcome back to the EMTSpot's Blood Pressure Podcast. You know, we've been talking about this connection between dehydration and blood pressure.
Yes.
Which is so important for us in EMS.
It really is. And, it's not just about recognizing those signs in our patients.
Yeah.
It's about taking care of ourselves, too.
Absolutely.
Think about those long shifts.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it's really hot or cold out.
Definitely.
Staying hydrated can make a huge difference.
For sure, it can affect how well we do our jobs.
Exactly.
And how we feel in general.
It's so easy to get caught up in the moment. Forget to drink enough water.
Especially when things are crazy.
But dehydration can really sneak up on you, affect your focus, your energy levels, even your decision-making.
It's true if we're not at our best. We can't provide the best care to our patients. So making hydration a priority.
Yes.
It's not just about our own health.
Right.
It's about making sure our patients get the best possible care.
Exactly. It's funny.
Yeah.
Dehydration is kind of like a chameleon.
How so?
It can show up in so many different ways.
Well, it's true.
From just feeling a little tired to some pretty serious complications.
So it's important to be aware.
Absolutely, both for ourselves and for our patients.
Right. Remember those key takeaways we talked about?
Yeah.
Recognizing the signs.
Oh.
Understanding how dehydration affects blood pressure.
Right.
And making sure we stay hydrated ourselves.
Exactly. Those are simple things.
Yeah.
But they can make a real difference out in the field.
So to all of our listeners out there, think about your own hydration habits.
Are you taking those steps to stay hydrated throughout your shift?
And if you see those signs of dehydration in your patients,
don't wait to act.
Right, early intervention is key. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into dehydration and blood pressure.
It has.
Thanks for being here today.
It was my pleasure.
I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
And you've been listening to the EMTSpot's Blood Pressure Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues.
Yes, spread the word.
Until next time, stay hydrated and stay healthy.